currently this is the model that we have, right? And we're saying that in this section we are going to basically actually focus on the model structure that we defined this model earlier in our session, right? We had the user model, and after the video I went to complete it and added some columns. Right now it's perfectly fine like this, and I've also added the transaction model as well. I've completed it, added all this section description and title. I've added it to it. Okay, now that we have all these columns, what we need to do now is to actually put this model into the code section. Okay, um so far for the user model, I think everything is fine. We had the user's table name and everything. We had a column, so we can just add the ones that we've added and then update these ones. So if you see, for first name, I've added this particular argument as well, nullable equals to false. That's what we were adding in the tables here, the nullable section, false and true, right? So we have id, first name, last name, middle name. Let's go to the code and see if we have middle name. There's no middle name, so I'm going to set it here, middle name. So basically, to be quick, we just copy this because it's going to be almost the same as this. So copy and paste this one, then we just change this one to middle name. Okay, so what other column are we missing from there? We have middle name, we have phone number, we have email, we have password, and the date created. The date created is what we are going to add here. Phone number should also not be nullable, right? So we say nullable equals to false. Password also cannot be equals to false as well. But middle name, we said this thing can be true, nullable can be true. Not everyone can have a middle name. Okay, the next one is um adding the date created. So the date underscore created is equal to, here is also going to be a column, but it's going to be something here, date time. So for the date time, you need to go to the top and then import date. So we go to SQLAlchemy here and then we import date time, because this has to do with the data types are actually from SQLAlchemy. So we go down and say it's going to be date time. That makes something wrong. Yes, date capital T time. So we imported it from SQLAlchemy, right? So but then you need to import this date time from Python itself. From date time in Python, import date time. So the date time module contains a particular sub module called datetime that we are importing basically. So though the names are the same, this one is a bigger module under which this particular module is. This one is from Python, and this datetime is the one from SQLAlchemy, right? If you come here, you see the data types usually are the ones from SQLAlchemy, the string, the UUIDs and everything. They are all from the SQLAlchemy, but the other ones that we use like default this are from Python. So this time, so but we need to set the default. Default is date time dot now. This is what we need to add, date time dot now, so that whenever we create the user, automatically the default time will be the time of creation. That now, the moment that the user is being created, right? The time will be recorded and be stored over here. That's why you have the date time over here, date time dot now as the default session. By the way, we know that the data type will be a date time. Basically, that's what we have. Okay, so from the model, all our user table or model is actually ready. All right, let's go back and see. We have email. We have email there. They've always had email over there. Now let's go to the transaction model. For the transaction model, we need to define all these things. So we go back. We don't have the transaction model yet. So we say class. Let me leave a comment first. We say class transaction. Remember, this is going to be um uh, depend on the base, inheriting from the base, so we need that. So we need to do the id, right? The id of the transaction is going to be the same as this, so I'm going to just copy this and paste this here, but they will follow the same model. Okay, so I've set the id to be the default one. When you come to transaction, I think there is something like title. Title cannot be nullable, right? Column is going to be a string. Nullable equals to false. It cannot be null. You need description of the transaction, right? Column going to be a string as well. Nullable is equal to false as well. Or we say true. Some people may not add any description, so we can set it to be true. Let's go there and confirm. So for the description here, the nullable can be true. So user can decide to add a description or not. So we are done with this. Done with this. Then we need to the type. So what transaction type is it? An expenses made or an income, right? So it's going to be a column. We are going to specify here. It's going to be a string as well. Nullable is going to be false. We need to specify the. Now what's the next thing? The cost, actually. The cost will be equal to, it's also a column, but this one will be a float, right? Nullable is equal to false. We need the cost, actually. And also remember, floats, we have imported that at the beginning long time. We are now using it, that's why it's here, right? Okay, now after the cost, we also had something like the medium, whether the medium is through bank account or through mobile money. So it's just basically a string that the user need to specify. It's also false, right? Now for that transaction again, what are we missing? We've done cost, we've done medium, we've done type, we've done id, we've done title, we've done date created and date of transaction. So we go here. So date created, date underscore created will be equal to the column is going to be the same as this, so that the time that we create it, it will be the same as, copy this, coming to paste this here. So it's the same, right? So the data you create it is going to save that moment, the moment that it's stored, it's going to save it as a default value. Date of date of what did we write? Date of transaction, date of actual transaction made. The user have to update this in a column, and then it's going to be a date time as well. Then nullable is going to be equal to false. This one the user has to specify it. This one, when we are creating this particular transaction, new transaction, the time is going to create is different from the date of transaction. The actual transaction, the date of the transaction will be the one that we said the user may have forgotten to record a particular transaction of yesterday by creating this transaction item today. So the actual date of transaction that the money was spent will be stored here, by the time that the user was creating this particular transaction instance will be this one stored, so that we'll now know the difference, right? So the time that the money was actually spent and the time that it was updated in the database, we do that. Okay, so this model is fine, and then this model is also created. So the user model and the transaction model is also created nicely, and at this point we are not missing anything when it comes to the model. Okay, so what do we need now? You see, a user, right? One user, for example, can have multiple transactions, right? So this is one table and this is another table. But a user can have multiple transactions, right? So we need to find a way to link this table to this table so that when we get a user here, one user, we need to be able to fetch all the transactions related to that user from the user transaction table, right? So there should be a way of linking one table to the next. That's what we are going to do. So how do we link this one table to this one? Okay, this is the user table, right? One user can have multiple transactions from the transaction table. So it's like one to many relationship. One user can have multiple transactions. That's one to many relationship. So how do we do that? We are going to import some stuff from SQLAlchemy. We are going to import something called ForeignKey. When we are using it, I will explain it to you. Then the next thing also we are going to from SQLAlchemy.orm import from SQLAlchemy import relationship. Yes, we are going to use to set the relationship between the two tables. Okay, now how do we set that relationship? Okay, Um, so one next column that we have for this particular user is going to be like a column bar. We are going to say the relationship variable is going to be transaction relationship. So this is going to have transaction that right a is going to have transactions, right? And that transaction is going to be the relationship is going to be the relationship with which model, with the transaction model, right? And then there's something called back populate. Back populate is going to be the variable, right? The variable inside the um the variable inside the so this model just mean we are going to be having a relationship of this user table to the transaction table. That's the relationship. And that back populate is actually going to specify we are going to have another variable here that will be holding a relationship to. So the two of them should have relationship, right? So when I come here and I will say owner underscore owner, right? The owner should be from it's going to be having a relationship also with which table is the user table, right? And then the back populate should also refer to you see the relationship that which variable are we using to have the relationship here is owner, right? So we are going to copy this owner here into the back populate of this one, and then the this is the one having a relationship with this one is going to be we are going to copy down one here. Those are the variables that are holding the relationship, so we need to share them. While this one takes the variable that hold the relationship of the previous one of this one also hold the um, variable that hold the relationship the owner from here, right? Now there's one thing that is also missing here in the transaction. The transaction is the one that we are having, but we need to have a column that will store the user variable, the user ID. So this is the class transaction base, right? We are fetching, so a user can have multiple transactions. So meaning that if you come to the transaction table, there's going to be a lot of transactions, plenty in that table. But one particular user, so there's going to be transaction basically from different users in the same table. When it comes to the transaction table, there's going to be transactions that will be created and stored in the transaction table, but those transactions may come from different users, right? So when you want to fetch among all the transactions, you want to fetch all the transactions related to only one user. You need you need to find a way to actually be able to fetch that, right? So you want that be able to fetch if you come to the transaction table and you should be able to fetch only a transaction related to one user. You need to be storing when you are creating, you need to store the owner ID against the transaction each time. So if you make a transaction and you are storing it in the transaction table, you need to accompany it with the user or the owner's ID, the user's ID, the user for that particular transaction. You have to add it to as a column to the transaction that you are making, so that when you different users are keeping the transaction in the transaction table, when you're coming back to fetch for a particular user, you can use that owner's ID linked to the transaction to fetch them. That's why we need a different column. Let's call it the owner underscore ID. That will be a column. This is going to be a column, and this column is going to contain a UUID, usual as UUID, right? True. UUID true. And then it's going to the ID that we are going to keep here inside the transaction table is not going to be from the transaction itself. It's going to be from a different table. That's why we are going to use the foreign key. That the ID that we are going to keep in this variable is going to be from outside, right? But we need to tell which table, from which table, where is it going to come from. So it's going to come from the table, not the model, the name of the, but the table users, right? It's going to come from the table users. So the foreign key is going to come from users.id. So meaning that if you go to the table users, right? If you go to the table users, you're going to have an ID, the ID variable from there. So that is the key, that's the foreign key. So if you come to the transaction table, this user's ID is a foreign key, or it's a foreign ID, right, that we are keeping here. Right, so this owner ID will be associated with each transaction each time. Anytime you create a new transaction, the user's ID will be attached to it, so that when we are fetching all transactions related to one user from the transaction table all together, we'll be able to only sort out the ones that are related to the particular user we are fetching. Because different users are going to come and they are going to have their transactions in the same transaction table. And anytime we create and we add, we attach the user's ID to each transaction, then we will be able to fetch it back. Take note that this ID that we are keeping here is going to be the ID of the transaction itself, right? Then each transaction is going to have their own ID, but then we're able to link it to the owner's ID as well. That's why we have something like this, right? So that's how we draw the relationship between them. First, you need to understand the thing, that the relationship. A user can have multiple transactions. So when you are creating transactions, you need to be adding the user's ID to any new transaction you make in the name of that particular user. That's why this owner's ID is going to serve as a column there, right? And then this one is just basically setting up the relationship, and this one is also going to serve as the relationship. So when we are creating the table, you will not be able to see these variables here inside the table. They are just relationship, right? They are just linked. You will not see them when we open our database right now, right? Okay, so I'm going back to my database. I have users here. I'm going to delete my users table as well, so that everything will be created from afresh. Let me refresh this one. Okay, so I'm going to, don't mind this one here, so I can just quickly delete this thing over here. Okay, so let me go to um database. So transaction and relationship have been established. So I've been able to establish the relationship, right? I've been able to establish the relationship between the tables. I've been able to link this table to this table. Now we are creating. So let me run this. Let me open this and run this again. So we should see all the tables created for us if there is no error. Okay, there's an error. Yeah, basically. So we didn't give, let me see. When it came to our transaction table, we need to give a username. Every table should have this one. Table name should be users, right? So let's go. We need to do underscore table name is equal to tables underscore equals to transactions. Basically, we needed to add this. Yes, so it's now complete. It's now saying complete, so meaning that it has been created. So let's go to our database and see if those things have been added. Let me right click, refresh. So I have two now here, right? So I have transaction and users. Let me go to transactions and view all rows. Let me see. So we have, yes, ID, title, description, type, cost, medium, date created, date of transaction, the owner ID, right? The owner ID, but you can see that there is no, this particular one is not there. The owner ID is there, but there is no owner, because this one is going to serve as a relationship. It's not a column, so this one is a column, column, column. So you see all the column will appear, but the relationship will not appear in the table here, right? So that's, so this is a time step, that's a time zone. So let's go to where do I get to? No, we need to go to see the users table as well. Right click, view all rows. So you should be able to see, yeah. So you have the ID, the email, first name, last name, middle name, password, phone number, and the date created. Right, all these are created, but then we don't have yeah, we don't have the relationship table because it's not a column, right? So these things are, we will see them in action when we are creating users and then creating new IDs and all that, right? Yeah, basically this is how we end up creating our models and then linking the two tables together. We'll see them in action when we are creating users, as I said, so that it makes sense to us. Yeah, so that's why we had to import relationship and foreign key. And I hope by now we now understand why foreign key is needed and where it was used, right? Okay.